Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining. Today is September 11th, and this is the RTM Public Works Committee meeting, and it's approximately 7:33 in the evening. So I didn't get into much detail on the agenda, but I did send out an attachment that is a bit more detailed, so we'll be following for the most part along with that. Tonight's secretary is Vincent. Thank you, Vincent.
Now what do I do?
So far, you're doing great.
Okay. Before we go any further, on August 30th, we lost Frank Kemp. He was a great man. He was a, excuse me. May I ask you all to stand? Moment of silence.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. All right, so we're going to start off with what was the original intention for this meeting, which we started to arrange for back in February. You know, we had met with Ed, we went through the budget, and the budget had already been set, so it made the meetings somewhat inconsequential, but still informative. Certainly, it's always informative when we meet with Ed. So the intent was to say, okay, why can't we try and, for the next budget, have a sit-down meeting and talk about Public Works budget before the budget is formulated. So we're here tonight to have a discussion, to talk out different aspects of Public Works, how much it costs us as a town. And so I want everybody to conduct themselves in a reasonable fashion. I don't want to see anybody pounding shoes on the desk or anything like that, okay? So with that, we'll go to the agenda. How are you tonight, Ed?
Good.
Okay. So, on the first page, we have overall final results for 24-25 fiscal year. Expenses $5,000,002, original versus actual $5,003,000, $115,000 or 2.2% over the original budget. Revenue $2.2 million originally versus actual of $2.6 million, $418,000 or 18.9% over the original budget. So the operating deficit is 2.987 original versus actual of 2.685. So it somehow whittled that down a bit, $302,000 or 10% under. So that's the overall. I started to look at some of the pieces within that, and the first one that pops up is roadway and walkway maintenance budget. Okay, this is part of the operating budget as I recall. So 23-24 actual 1.9, 24-25 actual 1.98 versus original of $2,152,000 or 165,000, 7.7% below. Original a 0.3% decrease to the prior year's actual. So the only thing that I picked up per se, and it's not a big item, is the motorized equipment and repair. Actual expense $113,000 versus $84,000, $28,000 or 34% over the original budget. So what's happening with the equipment, Ed?
With especially the years towards the end and after COVID, the actual equipment is, I'd say, is breaking down where it normally did. The parts have doubled in price.
Lovely.
And just getting some of the newer equipment that you folks have been approving. I'm a year and a half waiting on a chassis now for one of the big plow trucks. They're just not turning them out like they used to. So I have a body to put on a chassis with no chassis right now, so.
Yeah, that doesn't work too well.
It does not. So that is the main reason for that one. the look ahead,
Yeah.
the prices they're not coming down.
No, I don't think they are.
So if you look at my requested budget over the last maybe 3 years, I've kind of walked it up slowly
Yeah,
to see what would happen in the market.
Right.
And to catch up to what we would normally do with regards to repair, but based on the new pricing. That's probably the best way to explain that item right there.
yeah, so as you think ahead to 26, 27, you think you're gonna have to adjust the numbers up?
I'm probably gonna have to,
Significantly?
I've been, if you look, I've probably been walking it up maybe 5 or 6% every year, 7%. And speaking to Brian, the head mechanic,
Yes.
what he sees on the horizon.
Yes,
We do see some savings in the liquids that go in the truck, let's say, from oils to the windshield wiper fluid, whatever it may be.
Yeah, fluids.
Those came back down,
yeah,
but the hard mechanical pieces,
yeah,
his good example is a brake job used to cost him maybe, in parts, about $350. They cost him $1,100 now. And we do the brakes on these trucks on a
Right.
regular basis.
Yeah.
We check them and then change them when needed. But
Yeah.
it's a rotating stock. We have a large, for a smaller town, we actually have a large stock where we do use the vehicles quite often.
all right, so that's certainly something to consider as we look ahead into the next upcoming budget. The 25-26 budget right now is showing, is at $2,173,000 or 8.7% increase over prior year's actual. Will DPW spend the budget or come in low again? I suspect not.
Towards the end of the year, you folks have seen, I don't know if you get to see it, I do get to visit the Board of Finance to do transfers at the end of the year.
Yes, sir.
You will see that of all the departments, as I explained to the new finance director, I'm your problem child. I show up, but if you look at the things that I have to transfer into, whether it be credit card charges, whether it be, well, one of them is the mechanics account. There's commodities that I try to cover as best I can. Electric seems to be one that fluctuated pretty good this year that I had to catch up to. So those are some of the items I do end up transferring towards the end of the year. But as a net, overall net, I'm on the plus side if you put the revenues and our expenses together. That's the part that I have a conversation with the Board of Finance every year. And the big ticket item, of course, is solid waste,
Yeah,
MSW.
yeah.
We are very popular, our transfer station right now.
So you, I think you said last time that you sort of set the budget target to have the overall dump run about a $400,000 expense, right? I think it's
400.
It feels like 350, I think, is where we.
somewhere around that.
When I changed the rates, I tried to keep that deficit the same as we were going up. That was in October of 2022, when I asked for that rate change. That was the thought process there. Knowing that we had a contract year coming up the following year, we had basically a full year to gather some rather large revenue at that time, and we did. Once Wind Waste bumped up their new to their new rate from, it was 99.37, we went to 103, and we still held at 118. And what I'm doing right now is putting together a tipping fee rate change request that will go to town administrator and the director of finance first. I kind of get their input, if you will, on what they see the market at. I tell them what I see the market's going to be. We take a look at the numbers that Wind Waste is going, and the really good thing about that 5-year contract is I locked them in at 3%. I know what it's going to be every year for the next 5 years, and if we renew it for 5 years after that, it's going to stay constant. That's not tied to the CPI.
Right. And so is there any thought about, in your discussions about adjusting the rates, is to, I'll say this, increase the profitability of the tip, right? So that
I want to be very careful, and I think that this is the discussion I had with Kate Bush before she left, was, okay, we're going to raise the rates, that's great, let's make some money, that's good. Where are the haulers going to pass the cost? And they're going to pass it to the residents. So I wanted to be very careful about how I did that. So it seems that as soon as I changed it in October, there was an outcry from the haulers that, you're killing their profit. I've yet to hear back from the residents on how that impacted them. I'm sure there was an increase. I don't know if folks can acknowledge that or not, I don't know, but.
Just do the out-of-town haulers.
We're only supposed to take garbage in our transfer station that comes from Darien. I don't know how that works, but that's what they say we're supposed to do. So we do try to stick to that letter of the law. But that's the balance I try to strike, and that's why I go to now Jennifer and Josh. After that, it'll go to the first selectman and the board of selectmen for their approval. But I want to make sure that I'm not the only eyes that see it. And I'm not the only one making an input. I need that, I need the feedback to make me feel a little bit better about what direction I'm going and the percentage of increase that I'm going to add to.
So I see at the year end of the fiscal year that just closed that we ended up transferring in, and this is strictly for waste management, $220,000 in order to try and
Balance the
balance it out.
increase in the
Yeah, and
MSW
even then we came out $400,000 short against expenses, even with the transfer, so we definitely got.
That's the overall department, the waste management.
Waste management,
department.
yeah. I isolated that.
What I was, if you look at it, what I was looking at was the MSW or solid waste management area versus the revenues that cover that one line item, because it's the biggest one, it's over $1 million of that one item, on one cost center. But the rest of it is to run the transfer station.
I know.
And I think someone had asked, and maybe not, maybe, I don't know if it was any folks, but there was a time like, well, can you put together something that shows us a cost neutral? Can you give us something that we break even when we're done? And I said, it's going to impact the taxpayers of this town more than I think you folks would like it to. So I've been very careful about trying to keep that separation. And if John or Jen want me to take a different approach, I'll hear that when I go for that rate increase then. Because there's a couple other items I need to change to, the brush, the logs, and the leaves.
Yeah,
I'll bump them up a little bit too.
I found this, is this the most current one? Yeah.
118, yes it is.
Okay. Yeah, because there's all kinds of different stuff in here.
And I bumped up the RDA sticker purchase too. It was 120, for the folks that don't have a hauler, I bumped that up to 150. And it was 40, and I bumped it to 50 for the folks that do have haulers. I do have to say, it's the 150 a year is still the best. I know you have to take your garbage there, it's still the best bargain in town, because they're charging $60 a month, from what I understand. The haulers won't tell me exactly, but it's going to be a little bit higher. Multiply that by 12, and we're looking at $720 a year just in garbage hauling. That's if you don't do recycling, right? Is there additional charge for recycling? I'm assuming they charge you a little bit more to come a second time.
I don't have a checking charge for it.
Well, especially if you compare to other towns as well.
Absolutely.
New Canaan is much more expensive, I know Westport's more expensive, so I think we have a good deal for our residents.
And I lean to the first selectman, because it's whatever his flavor is for trying to make it a cost neutral, cost center, if you will. He'll give you that guidance as we go through the budget process.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm not looking to try and get, budget neutral. I think that's asking a bit much.
$400,000, you said.
But yeah, it did come in 400,000. So I agree that the rates definitely need to be reviewed. Okay, well that covers.
On that?
Yeah, go ahead.
And you mentioned that we're a very popular destination for haulers, not just Darien haulers, but people hauling from other towns. When we've talked about this in the past, it was not just the rates that might have been lower than we could have asked for. It was also that we're convenient right off the highway, that we have an excellent staff and very professional crew there that make life easy for the haulers. There's a lot of intangible factors that make it good for the haulers. So I guess I would just observe that to the extent that we are providing something that's more valuable for the haulers, I would not be shy to raise the rate. Again, I would defer to your judgment as to what the market will bear and all that kind of stuff. And certainly want to be sensitive to the fact that haulers are going to pass some portion of the cost increase through, but I think we should consider being more aggressive on that. There are other places to squeeze, so.
I'd share that point of view.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, is that a consensus of the committee?
It is for me, in that if you don't pass it on to the users who are using the haulers, it's gonna get passed on to the same,
Taxpayers.
the taxpayers anyway. So you're gonna spread it out to folks who aren't using the haulers.
And there's an opportunity to collect the arbitrage on the haulers coming in from other areas.
Okay, let me make sure you guys understand, it's the same haulers that come to our place, that they do all Darien. They may have some accounts outside of Darien.
Right.
Let's say. City Carting is one of our biggest vendors. If they can't dump on their own floor in Stanford, they dump their waste here. And we charge them, and then they take it out and they charge us. They basically store it for a day.
Yeah.
Right. But we make a vig on it, so why not?
Exactly.
I'm not here to kiss the ring, right? But I mean, I've said to Rolf many times that you're the most important employee in this building, right? And
No disrespect.
I'm not an employee.
Actually, you're graced by both the most important and the least important.
So,
Amazing.
just
Both ends.
all I'm saying is, you run a solid operation and you add value to what Darien does there, and to the extent that you are able to increase price because of the value you add, don't be shy.
Thank you. I won't be.
Any other comments or things to add about the transfer station? I think we covered that pretty well, but I want to give everybody a chance to speak if they need to or want to. Just a quick one here again, small electricity. Actual electricity expense 176 versus 151 on the original budget at 16.3%, or $24,000 over the original budget. Are we using more electricity? The rate's gone up. Is increased funding needed?
Which item, I'm sorry, which item were you looking at?
Electricity, building, public building management, electricity.
We got AI computers going on somewhere?
No?
Is someone turning down the thermostat?
It's mining.
We're not growing anything in here. I will tell you what happened, you'll see the increase if you go back, and I do, and I have all my years of working here, plus 2 more years.
Yeah.
So I have them on my spreadsheet. Every year I go back and I take a look at what we actually used.
Okay.
You see the increase start to happen right around COVID. And what it was is, I opened up these vents in this building to circulate more air. That was the recommendation from the government, the medical association too. Circulate. So and we continue to do it now. The one thing that we're looking to do, and you'll see it this coming year as a request to replace the 2 units on the town hall, the AC units, is they come with variable motors that are programmable more right now than we can with the software that we have. So I want to be able to control it better, shut them down a little bit more. So you should see in 2 years that reduction is going to start to happen. I don't like running them a lot. I don't like seeing a high electric bill, but I also know that it helps the health of the employees that are working in this building, as well as the residents that do come in here.
And are those air handlers or are those AC units as well?
Those are going to be the AC units up on the roof, the 2 big ones that handle both of the town. We just did the one on the Mather Center here. It's the same exact unit. So we have a good price, we have a good contractor. I still have to put it to bid, but at least I know what I'm getting into. And we've been keeping them running for the last 2 years. Sometimes if you've come in here, you'll see large fans in the hallway. That means they're not running. So the first selectman has asked me to move them up, if I would, so that we can get this building back to where it should be on a regular basis.
Are they perchance more efficient than the one they're replacing?
That's the whole idea. And being able to program them and run them and drop them down as far as fan motors go, shutting down the AC where you're bringing in cooler air. The older units didn't have that ability. We actually had to do it manually. So at my desk, I'll get a call and I'll look on the computer, I'll open up the fresh air, shut down the AC, and for a couple hours during the day, we're using cooler air from outside. Problem with that, this time of year, it warms up pretty quickly. And if I leave my desk, there's really nobody there to switch it off. Most of the guys are in the field, Tony's in the field, Dave Sabine's in the field, they're working. So it'd be so much nicer to have the computer say, hey, you know what, we need a little bit cooler air right now, let me shut those vents, and we turn the AC on. That's what these two new units will do, and the software that we have in place.
I thought when you said you do it manually, you had to send somebody up on the roof with a wrench.
Yes. I'm out there swinging it and rotating it, and opening the vents.
I only just have one last comment before we move on, and specific to roadway and walkway maintenance. The year that just finished, the original budget was 2.1 million, but we actually came in at 1.986, so we came in under the budget. Now, looking at the present budget, 25-26, we have a budget of 2,000,001, which is very similar, almost the same as the previous original budget of 2024-25. So, but I'm thinking about the fact that the year that just finished actually came in under from that budget. So are we not spending everything that we put in the budget? And obviously it appears that we are not spending everything we had in the budget. And is there any particular reason that occurred that you can recall?
Sure. If you look at our overtime usage for the last maybe 4 or 5 years,
Okay.
with the lack of snow that we've gotten,
Okay.
doesn't mean we don't have events, because any type of precipitation with the temperature less than 32 degrees is going to require that I bring in a crew, the smallest of crews to do the salting, but if it starts to get larger or it starts to get closer to school, I bring in more people so that I'm not the one closing school. Please don't tell any of the children that. But my job is to make sure at 5 o'clock in the morning when the superintendent calls, I can give them an update on where we stand. So the events, I think we had 15 events last year and a total of 16 inches of snow.
Yeah, it was.
It wasn't much, but the year before that, we only had 8 inches of snow.
Yeah.
But we had 11 events, so we were out there still doing salting for the events where the precipitation was very, very light, but the temperature was very, very low.
Yeah. So.
That's one of the items.
Yeah, and no one can really predict the weather accurately, so you just, I guess, go with what you've had in the past and see what happens.
The other one is the fuel. If you guys don't know, I think you do. I buy the fuel for the town.
Right.
I control the budget for gasoline and diesel.
Right.
And any department that pumps out of our station, we track. We do invoice a couple of the other outside agencies, our sewer department's one, but Tokenique, Darien, Library, Board of Ed, and so on. There's 4 or 5, there's 5 of them. So with that said, my budget is put together the first week of December. The new pricing for gasoline, we don't get till the 17th and 18th of December. So my budget that I put together, I usually give the town administrator a little heads up of what I used for a per gallon cost.
Yeah.
And then from that, she can adjust if the price goes down. Understanding that I have to estimate all the department's usages based on what you used the previous year. You're probably going to see a little reduction in that area too, as far as our expenditures. We just put in the fleet 4 new hybrids. I happen to be driving one of them. They get 40 miles to the gallon. They used to get, the vehicle, same vehicle I had, used to get just around 20. So looking forward, my recommendation is still going to be, as we replace vehicles, if we're going to go new, we should stick with some type of belt and suspenders, which is a hybrid that runs on both gas and electric. The electric cars, I still think that they have some ways to go. I'm not an expert in it, but I see what people complain about the most about charging stations. Where are they? You know, being tied. If you run out, you're tied to a spot for a certain period of time. All those things play a role in. I think my recommendations stick to go with something that we can not only use and benefit from, but my mechanic can actually fix. So that was another item that we had to look at.
He can fix the hybrids?
The engine part of it, The engine part of it, for the most part, everything but the electric part, that has to go back to, because it's under warranty, it has to go back to the dealer.
Okay, all right, then let's move on, unless somebody else has any other questions on this page? No? Okay. So,
Rolf, can I ask
Sure.
for a copy of that?
Sure.
I did something silly this morning and printed it and only got the first page.
yes, so two sides on the printing.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Okay, so paving townwide budget, 24-25 at 1.3, 25-26, 1.4, 26-27 budget, 1.4, okay? And of course, I think our goal is to replace the 81 miles of road every 10 years. Did I say that correctly?
It's 20,
Oh, excuse me,
yeah,
20.
it's a 20-year cycle, 4 miles a year.
4 miles.
And we've been doing just over 5.5 for the last 5 or 6 years. And I'll tell you the reason for that, then I'll let you go, and I'm sorry.
That's all right.
When we work with the utility companies, generally speaking, I try to get them in when we're supposed to be paving a road, within a couple of years. They don't always cooperate. So what ends up happening is, based on the age of the road, they own half the roadway for milling and paving restoration, and a portion of the remaining road. So if it's a 20-year cycle, and they come in, and it's only 10 years of new asphalt down, it's only halfway through its useful life, let's say. They own half of the road plus half of the remaining road. So 10 of 20 is half the time. So they own basically 3/4 of the roadway. And I pick up the difference because I want to pave the road curb to curb. I don't like the mix and match of a new road, an older road, I don't care how old it is. It just never seems to last, and it's usually the old part that doesn't last, and so I'm back in there paving it a couple years later. So I've been trying to balance that. That's why you see we're not doing exactly 4 or 4.2 or 4.3 is I've been picking up those other roads too at the same time, and they've been paying for it. They've been paying for it, and for some reason they like that approach. As long as I let them know ahead of time when they come in for their roadways, I give them an estimate based on a unit price that just slightly above what we've been using, because I have to expect it's going to go up a little bit. And I give them an estimate, and I have them agree to carry that with their budget and perform a restoration or perform payment to us so we can do restoration at the end of the project. And I have to sign off on it, and so do they. So we get that before they put a shovel in the ground. Both a gas company and water company, they've been very accommodating in that respect. I don't think they like to do paving, and I don't mind doing it. I think it's a better product. I think we can control the workmanship as well as the schedule. And we do like to, in their end, to keep it, they give me 10 weeks every year to stick it between June 20th and September 1st, or I'm sorry, August 26th. So there's my window to work with a contractor. So that's why you see it's a little bit above the 4 every year. It's because I mix and match the utility stuff in there too.
Now, does that formula, if you will, apply to, let's say, some of the development work that's going on as well? Like, for example, Heights Road right now. I was so optimistic to see that the one project, the Palmer's, which is now Heights Crossing, was finally finishing. So like, okay, so we're gonna pave Heights Road, but then I saw that the 2 buildings on either corner of Edgerton are now in the process of, I guess, being torn down for another development. So how do you think that's all gonna?
So with the developers, I do a trench repair on theirs and get a contribution back. I did that with Federal, I did it with Corbin. David pretty much just went out and did the road anyway, after the road anyway, so I didn't really have to tell him to do anything. The gas company on Heights Road owns half that roadway. They own half of Hollow Tree Ridge Road also, and I already have the money for that. So as soon as we pay, it's on the schedule to pave next year. I want to do Hollow Tree. It's been on my list for
A while.
Yes, absolutely a while. And I do want to get that off the list. I do want to do as much of Heights Road as I possibly can without doing it, ripping it up, and paving it again.
Right.
But that's a conversation for me and the developer. to see how much they're going to impact out there, because I'd like to get as much of it done as I possibly could.
Yeah.
Really depends on where the utilities are coming out, gas, water, sewer, any storm drainage you want to tie in. So we'll see when the plans come out. But
Yeah. That's gonna be
we're
a
on for
while.
July next year to do that, with those 2 roadways.
Mm.
So as you do the longer capital plan, 6-year capital plan, how do you think about inflation in that?
I generally don't do, if I do put if you look at the numbers, exactly, it's 2%.
2%.
I walk it up 2%. Knowing that I'm gonna be doing more than the 4%, I have the roads that are supposed to be getting done, right? That's the most important ones to me. There's others that come in as complaints. There's others, to be honest with you, I found 2 this year that haven't been done since 1996 or something like that. They're little dead-end roads, but they've lasted a long time, and I finally get a call about taking a look at it, and I look on our sheet, and for some reason, it just wasn't caught. So I push that on the list too. So as I start to build my list, I start to prioritize. Then I go out and inspect them. Then I go out and measure them. Then we check the drainage system out there. So as far as inflation goes, what is actually driving my request is what I have in front of me that needs to get done this year. And generally speaking, it's been falling pretty much well in line with what we have. So no, inflation to me, because I've seen the price of asphalt go down for a couple of years and then back up again, I did take a big jump in the middle of COVID, when I still couldn't get contractors anyway. So that happened too. But right now it's leveled out. Basically last year and this year, I got the same unit price for asphalt. And the same unit price for milling, and the same for tack coat. So the inflation part didn't play a role this year, and generally it doesn't for me. It just means whatever roads, if I put a list of roads together and there's one on there that goes, you know what, it's on the list to be done, but it doesn't need to be done, I can take that off.
So that's for the paving part, but how do you, so as you do the 6-year capital plan, do you factor in inflation in any of the line items, the sidewalk maintenance, any of it, or is that just not something you contemplate?
It's not something that I put into it, but the sidewalk on, what you saw for rehab was programmed when Jamie Stevenson was here. She had me go out and inspect all the sidewalks and come up with a comprehensive list, cost-wise, of what would be needed to take care of them all. Go out there and walk them, tell me what's needed. So I had my foreman do that. It took him about 6 weeks. He came back with a pretty comprehensive list. It came in at about $3.2 million worth of work. I can't physically do $3.2 million worth of work. So we had this conversation as what can we actually do correctly with a competent contractor and inspect, okay? Because I will not do work and not inspect it. I'm sorry, contractors are contractors, you have to watch them, all right? So that was my goal, and it turned out to be around, started at 750, that was still too much, and you'll see I knocked it down to 500,000. And there was a year I did none because, one, I couldn't get any work done, and so I still had a pretty hefty balance. Why am I asking for more money? So I bumped it out. You know, it's, but to answer your question, no, I did not put anything to do with inflation in those. I do have unit prices. I bid them every 3 years, the sidewalk. It's a 1-year bid, I can carry 2 extra years. And generally speaking, that contractor's been holding this price now for 2.5 years. For concrete work, asphalt work, curbing, whatever's the unit prices are on our list that he gives us. And they're pretty comprehensive. As you say, there's about 15, 20 lines on this. This is the sheet I use to come up with an estimate for a sidewalk. Say, hey, do sidewalk from Sedgwick, on Mansfield, Sedgwick to Overbrook. And that's one of my list. I can pull out this here, I can fill in the blanks, it gives me a number at the end, and then I start putting it in my yearly plan. Where am I gonna be able to do this? And where are my balances? So, and I prioritize them based on need, okay? And I also evaluate them based on location. Mansfield Avenue needs to get done. It's on the board right now, we're designing it. The DOT, not very cooperative. I wish they were better at it. But they're asking for more and more every time. It used to be I could get a permit to do 1,000 feet of sidewalk, and it was send us a sketch. Now it's send us a survey and put together the details for any type of sidewalk bypass or any type of lane changing. And so we're basically doing engineering plans in our engineering department, but understand it's only Darren and I. So all the things that we do, we just kind of keep pushing this down there. So Mansfield is going in, and I will start the clock as soon as I submit it. And I will guarantee it'll take me 3 months to get a permit.
Got it.
And that's ridiculous.
So if I look at the capital plan, though, that implies that the most of that work that you have worked through is gonna finish up in 27, 28, because the sidewalk rehab budget plummets from 500 to
It's a
150.
drop.
It does. And with some of the newer complaints that I've gotten, other sidewalks I'm going out and looking at, there is a section too that we've been looking into. I had a gentleman look at all of our curb cuts, all our handicap ramps at the corners,
Yeah.
and see which ones are missing.
Yeah.
The state is requiring us to put together an ADA compliance plan.
Right.
My big ticket item is $350,000 worth of corner curb cuts, handicap ramps. So that will find its way onto my desk to get done in a bid form, and then it's going to find its way into the budget somewhere. And it may entail that I start doing some of them now with the funds that I have available, and then start pushing some of the other rehab work out, depending on its prioritization and the need. And you know, how bad is the sidewalk? Can it last another year while I take care of $75,000 worth of, you know, curb cuts and the handicap ramps and corners? Just to show that we're being compliant, we have to start showing something. And I think getting the list together was the hard part. I had to send somebody out to go walk all the sidewalks
Survey everything.
and measure them and come up with an estimate for material. Well, it's all gonna be concrete, but material matching. Some of the asphalt sidewalks will have concrete curbs, handicap ramps in the corners. So doing that, we've come up with a harder estimate, so at least I have an idea of what's on the table for me going forward.
So does,
Yes.
sorry, just to clarify, the $3.2 million was to maintain / upgrade the existing sidewalks? That's not looking at any potential new sidewalk, right?
That's correct.
Okay, just want to clarify.
And that was from an inspection of the existing sidewalks out there, including the downtown ones.
Thank
So just implied from what you're saying then, when we get the next 6-year capital plan, should we be expecting that in 28, 29, 29, 30, et cetera, that we're back up at the $500,000 level?
I don't know if it's gonna be that high, but there's gonna be a number there. And there isn't one now. It may be $300,000.
In terms of approach on sidewalks versus paving, I think the committee, we see the wisdom of the long-term investment in paving and the need for that kind of commitment to it. I guess one of the questions is, would you consider, or what do you think about the approach of putting paving in the same kind of approach where it's a consistent kind of level of investment and you're prioritizing where that investment goes on a year-to-year basis, which is what you're doing in paving right now. But they seem to go through different processes for you. How do you think about them differently?
It's hard to explain, but as most of the work that we're doing and have done since I've been here has been complaint-based, I guess is a good way to put it. That's where I think Jamie had asked me to go out and kind of evaluate what needs to be done, come up with a number so that we could properly plan the out years. And then she directed me to go back and prioritize the areas as I would see fit, as commuters use, near the schools, downtown areas, trip hazards, lawsuits, things, wrap my head around, okay, where do I need to attack first? And that's what I've been doing my best to try to do. So as I get a new complaint or something else shows up, I add it to the list. And then I look at the ones that are there that I haven't gone after yet. Is this something that should be a higher priority? And then I start moving them around a little bit. There's no magic to it. I think you gentlemen, I don't have secret lists or anything. I do have a ton of spreadsheets. They're all different colors. But they clue me in, they kind of get me to focus on certain things, show me what I've accomplished, show me what I haven't done. And from there, I try, as new stuff comes in, because it always comes in, there's always somebody looking to show me that there's something out there that needs to be done. I wish I could say I get on every street of this entire town, I just don't. don't have the ability to do it. So that is helpful too.
I guess where I think we're trying to go is as a alternative way of thinking about it, right? So you said we pave 4 to 5 miles a year on an expected useful life of 20 years of the road. If we were to think about sidewalks in a similar way, right? Useful life of a concrete sidewalk is X, I don't know what that number is, but therefore we should be budgeting to replace, 8%, 5% per year, like whatever the numbers are, but then that would create, in theory, and you can tell me I'm wrong, but in my head, that would create a nice stable investment plan to replace the sidewalks over a useful life.
My hope is never to have to do another sidewalk that I've done already since I've got here, if I was to stay here 30 years. Okay, so asphalt will last as long as the trees around it will allow it to. So, which is why I do try to remove trees that I think are going to be a problem later. So you get 25 years out of that asphalt. If you don't touch it, if it doesn't have to go anywhere and it's firmly put together right with a curb and dirt on the back, it'll be fine for that long. Unfortunately, we have trees. We have contractors, we have utility companies. Those things start to invade our asphalt sidewalks. Concrete will last 50 years. You can go out now and I bet you there's some out there that are 70. And they're probably still in pretty decent shape. I don't want to tell you what you would tell me, but my thought would be, you don't want me to put money where it's not needed. You don't want me to spend money on concrete sidewalks that don't need to be replaced. So my thought is, before I leave here, I want to complete that list and know that, okay, unless 1 or 2 straggles in here, I've taken care of everything that I identified through the sidewalk process. And you won't need that much capital investment in rehab sidewalks. I know there's some new stuff coming up that we'll talk about. But as far as rehab goes, once I finish this list, you guys should be able to sit back and go, okay, rehab should be a small number. It was 150,000 when I started here. I ramped it up. We're gonna spend a lot of money on this. We're gonna get all caught up, and we're gonna drop back down again. If I held steady to that, I wouldn't get much work done, which is why we ramped it up as high to the number that I can actually complete in a year. And then when we're done with this list, we're gonna be able to drop out of that.
Okay.
And so paving, what you saw, it's linear. This one is not so much. We front-end loaded this so that we can
So
comfortably.
the useful life of the sidewalk is much longer than a road, and therefore it doesn't require the same level of thinking, or
Spending.
we should think about it differently than road.
I think so.
Okay, that's helpful.
For what it's worth, my casual observation, Ed, and I've watched you since the day you started working here, is there's deferred maintenance that's being done. You didn't use that word, I used it. I don't know how far back it goes, but it seems like you're making up, or recent years have been making up to get the sideway stock up to a condition where it can be more routine maintenance at some baseline level. That's just my casual observation. I'm not putting words in your mouth, but I just share with the group, that's my observation. The sidewalk stock today is materially better than it was 20, 30 years ago when I first was living here.
We're playing catch up a little bit,
Yeah.
but I think we're making headway. I really do. I'm looking at the list I have. I do have a list. I do walk it out the years. I do look at my budget request against that, making sure I have a balance to, not down to the penny. For me, things come up, and I need a little bit of flexibility sometimes to go and do something, but still keep control of my projects and priorities line up and taking care of those at the same time.
The issue on sidewalks probably is more on building more of them, not maintaining them.
So for 26, 27, we have in there right now 750. So I'm assuming you're gonna hold to that number. But I am interested to know, do you feel that you have enough work and contractors to spend that number?
We're wrapping up quite a few. The big one that's coming is Mansfield Avenue. It's about $250,000 worth of work, concrete work.
From where to
Good thing
where?
There's no, what's that?
From where to where?
Sedgwick all the way up to Overbrook, it's basically the whole entire run.
When are you doing that?
That I don't know.
Okay.
As soon
He's
as the DOT
still
gives
going
me a
through the
permit.
whole
Yeah.
process of getting
Yeah.
permitted.
It's after he
I
finishes
asked
the
for
paperwork.
totally selfish reasons.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because I want to know when I can drive there, when it's going to be a problem.
Well, the good part about it is this sidewalk is up in the grass area, and it's quite a large grass area, so, but there'll still be impacts to travel and things like that, as always is. That's the one I'm looking for the DOT permit, it'll take a little bit longer to do. The one for Nearwater we're doing now, it's about $200,000. There's a Hollow Tree Ridge Road, asphalt sidewalk,
I know exactly where that is.
from Middlesex to where the curbing starts at 324, I believe the number is. Fortunately and unfortunately, I drive home that way every day.
That's where the
It's a
route-
sidewalk, but it's level with a road. I don't like it.
Where it comes out, there's about this much distance.
So that needs to be addressed. So as you see, as I
You're
prioritize,
aware of it.
that one's next, Mansfield's next, but they're both closer to schools. So, that hit my radar about 2.5 years ago.
Now, when you,
I get calls on that one a lot.
now when you come across a sidewalk that's really old and it's really in bad shape, I mean, how much can you do to, whatever, repair what's there as opposed to just pulling out what's there and putting in a new sidewalk? Replacing it, in effect.
First of all, if it's a hazard, you want to make sure we address it quickly.
Right.
So I'll send a crew out there to either cut it out and asphalt it, or if it's concrete and it's lifted, we'll go out and we'll grind it and we'll ramp it, make sure it's safe. Generally speaking, they come from complaints. People, I walked there, I caught my heel there, things like that, which is good. It gives me an opportunity to look and make sure if it's not on the list, maybe we should go out and look at it.
Yeah.
But actually go out there and fix the defect before someone gets hurt. And I've done 10 depositions here, 8 of them are trips and falls.
Trips and falls.
8. And I like to say they're preventable. Sometimes the rationale behind the trip and fall is not, but I'm not saying they didn't get hurt. I'm just saying they weren't watching where they were going type of thing. But there are ones out there that I have to address, and I go out and address them as soon as I can.
But is there a setback from the edge of the road for the sidewalks? I mean, is there a standard to that?
You
Code
can do a
per
show,
se?
you could do a snow shelf of 3 to 5 feet, or you can do the sidewalk right against the.
Right against it, okay.
Generally speaking, you want to take a look at the traveling speed, volume of cars, are you looking at safety, is the sidewalk 5 feet or wider? I mean, those are all things that play over in your head as you're laying things out. I'm doing Nearwater from Nickerson to the entrance to the park. It's about 2,000 feet. Needed. Had to battle a little bit with the trees that need to come down. Worked around a couple others that are still out there. I thought that was a pretty straightforward, let me rip it out and replace it. It didn't turn into that, it turned into a little longer process. So this year I didn't want to do it during the summertime where people were using the beach. So this is scheduled to start in October, it will be done in 4 weeks.
It's been concrete again?
It'll be asphalt that's down, all the way down there now, it'll just be replaced with what's there now. I did challenge the first selectman to try to help me with the north end, where there's 8 trees in the sidewalk, and what do we do with the sidewalk up there? Because to be honest with you, that area needs it, but if I post those trees, I may be looking for work.
Yeah, get it.
The trees on the south end were extraordinarily difficult to take out. There were a lot of very upset people about that.
Yeah.
And these trees were in such bad shape, right? We had tree experts coming in, 2 of them, and said, these trees are hazards. And I would go to these folks and say, all right, if you're willing to sign up to share the liability with the town, because if one of these trees falls on someone, the lawyer for the plaintiff is going to point to those studies that we ignored. Are you prepared to share in that liability? You tell me. I'm not going to go sign up taxpayers for that liability when we have experts say trees need to be taken down. Problem with the north part of Nearwater because all of those trees are absolutely gorgeous and they're perfectly healthy. And they are enormous. It has made the sidewalk impassable in multiple places. Not only is it not an ADA compliant, you hardly get through it now. And then right behind that is a 250-year-old, historical wall, right? There is no easy solution to that.
Can't put it on the roadside and take road width, you're right near a school, entrance and exits. Going on someone else's property, you would need an easement. That's if you even left the wall and you put the walk behind it.
Yeah, we try to take care of these trees. I mean, another request that we've had is you go up Ringshead Road up to the St. Luke's Church, right? And traffic can really back up there trying to get onto the post road because of that light, because there's no turn lane. So we could put a turn lane right there on the right side, right at that intersection is a gigantic, gorgeous tree, right? And we would have to take that out to do that. The question is, all right, well, we've got this traffic problem, but are we really prepared to take out trees that provide the canopy and shade and climate resilience and all
People
that?
can wait.
Well, they may have to wait 100 years for that.
It's gonna be a long way.
The point being is that when it comes to sidewalks, we could say repair budget needs to be X. The problem is that some of the repair on some of these sidewalks, the problems aren't linear, right? I can come to some places with a piece of cake, I can do all that. I get to other places, and you've got torches and pitchforks, right? Very angry people are making these changes, so it's a real challenge in some cases.
All right,
Can we move on to new
yeah, I was just gonna say, I think we've talked enough about the rehab budget. The next issue is any new sidewalks, any initiative for new sidewalks, which, there's been a lot of different people that have shown interest in new sidewalks. The budget for current year is 0. So we're very interested to know how we're gonna go forward with any new sidewalk initiative. I know that a consultant has been hired, and we're certainly very interested to know what role the consultant is going to play, what scope of work has been assigned to him or her, what time frame is they going to come back with any sort of results from their analysis. So I wonder if you could give us a fill-in on that.
So let's back up a little bit and talk about the 6-year capital plan. So that 6-year capital plan is actually a state requirement. And the reason they want this plan is that anytime a town is going to qualify for what's called a LoCIP grant, so LoCIP stands for Local Capital Improvement Projects, and those are grants by the state that says we're going to come in and help you fund a capital project. One of their requirements is that they're not going to do that unless that particular item is on a 6-year capital plan that's been updated and approved by, like Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance need to review and approve the 6-year capital plan. If it's not on a reviewed and approved 6-year capital plan, they will not make the grant. So one of the things from our standpoint is to say, all right, well, we'll come up with a plan. We'll make sure these numbers and these categories are on there so that we can qualify for one of these grants. But because of that, what I would not do is look at this plan and say, well, wait a minute, there's a missing item, or you haven't put in inflation or all that. That's really not the purpose of this plan, which is to sit down and carefully map all those things out. So for example, on sidewalks, which I'll go into in a minute, I kind of want to work backwards. What I want to do is I want to set the ground rules in terms of assessing sidewalks. I want to get a sense for how people are prioritizing it. And then we're going to back into a budget that comes from that. And based on the availability of contractors and capacity of our teams to do inspections and all that, we're going to come up with a plan that matches that. So it's not about saying, oh, well, wait a minute, we need a 6-year plan and we simply have to spend X amount of dollars on sidewalks. It's actually kind of the last thing I want to do in the scheme of things versus schools and everything else we spend in terms of capital dollars. Even if we had full contractor cooperation and all the inspection time we had, it's simply impossible to spend $2 or $3 million a year on sidewalks. It just physically can't be done, right? So here's the approach we're taking. If I back up to 2015, we had a pedestrian infrastructure advisory committee that was set up. And that was a great study, except for the fact that it was all kind of civilian-led. By that I mean kind of not professionals and experts. And when they went out and did that, they came up with bike paths, they came up with, more than 100 crosswalks to install in town. They had sidewalks everywhere. Fabulous, 130-page report. Much of that effort was wasted. The reason is, for example, a lot of the crosswalks that were put in were inconsistent with professional police guidance on crosswalks. What they don't want to have is crosswalks to nowhere. So I have a crosswalk here that's a sidewalk, and I cross over to the other side and there's no sidewalk. So I'm not going to have people walking the street or creating a dangerous situation. Or putting a crosswalk in the middle of the street when people come up to the crosswalk and say, crosswalk, of course I can just walk straight across here. Everybody's going to stop for me. In their judgment, it makes it more dangerous, where you can ask yourselves, if you've gone out and crossed the post road downtown where there's no crosswalk, yeah, we do it all the time. I promise you, everybody's paying attention. Whereas with the crosswalk, they pay less attention, and statistics show that. And so this report was filled with recommendations like that that were infeasible. So we're going to take a different approach this time. I am going to form a new pedestrian infrastructure committee. But the way we're starting with this consultant who's done sidewalk and sort of complete streets, which is the state initiative on this in other towns, is we're going to first start with Ed, me, Jennifer, and a few others coming up with a set of evaluation criteria for sidewalks. For example, if you look at the sidewalks that Ed has installed, a good example would be the sidewalks over by the Norton Heights train station. So now you can actually walk from Norton Avenue all the way to the train platforms on both sides, all down sidewalks, which we could not do before. Those were simpler sidewalks to build because they were on town property, there were no trees, no neighbors, no residents, no easements, none of that. So in that sense, those were simpler to build. If I, by comparison, take one sidewalk that's been talked about for years is the sidewalk up on Hoyt Street. So that was a big deal many years ago, still is in the minds of a lot of folks. The problem with that sidewalk is that in addition to the construction, you have the following. It's a state road, which requires not just state permitting, but state cooperation. The property lines on that street don't have a buffer, and so in many cases, they go right up to the road, which means that to put in a sidewalk, I've got to get an easement from each of the residents all along, and I've got to get one from each of them. In that case, I think we had three residents who adamantly refused, which means we have to sue them under eminent domain to force them to grant us an easement so that we can put in a sidewalk. And the additional problem is that once you have a sidewalk, you are responsible for clearing that sidewalk. I've had many calls from residents down in Florida panicking because they're not at their home in Darien during a winter snowstorm, and yet they're responsible for making sure that they cleared their sidewalk. The last one I'd say about that particular sidewalk is they estimated at the time, 10 years ago, to do that segment, and this is really to facilitate walking by commuters who wanted to get up to the Talmadge Hill train station. They estimated that was going to cost $750,000 to put in that sidewalk, time to get through easements and all the other problems that they had with that. And then they did counts of, well, so how many people are actually walking up that sidewalk to go to that station? And they said it's about 20.
20?
So the question for the town is, we're talking about allocating resources. Those people are very vocal about wanting to have that sidewalk. Do we want to spend $750,000 for these 20 people to use that sidewalk? And that's why this dynamic, when you get up in the northern part of town, gets a lot more complicated, because those lots are really spread out. And even if one that everybody's clamoring for is better sidewalk access to Oxford Elementary School, which I'll get to in a minute. But again, objectively, I think we need to take into account, when we're rating these sidewalks, how many people are going to use them for the amount of money we have to spend. So the process we're about to embark on with the consultant is not a way to budget these sidewalks, but a way to grade them. Okay, so if I pick, say, the Norton Heights sidewalks, those would have a score of 0, right, or 1, because they don't have a lot of the problems that I'm talking about. But let's say I want to go and evaluate a sidewalk that there's been a lot of clamoring for, which is between Oxford School, north on Mansfield to Pembroke Road. I don't know how far that is, 700 feet, 600 feet, something. Okay. It's probably the most difficult place to put in a sidewalk because it has the following features. One is, one side of the road is off limits because they have very, very old stone walls along a lot of expensive residences. So to do that, I'd have to take all of that out and force those people to give that up. And I have to pay for those easements, which will include the value of those stone walls. On the other side, the topography actually slopes up, so I'm going to have to take all that land out and probably put up a retaining wall to hold that back. I've got to get easements from the people who own that property. I've got to move Eversource power lines, which run down that, and either bury them or move them in some way. I've got to get state permission to do all of that. I've got to reconfigure that intersection so that it's kid and pedestrian friendly to go from that sidewalk to across Mansfield, which is a 40-mile-an-hour busy 2-lane double yellow line road. And I've got to reconfigure that whole intersection in terms of lights and signals and all of that. So to get that done, is that $1 million sidewalk for 700 feet? It's entirely possible that it could cost that much money. Okay, and so then we still have to do a count. How many kids are actually going to use this sidewalk, right? Because you think about it, you're going up there into Pembroke, and that branches out to a few places, but at one point, you're going to get a mile away. Are we really going to get that? So what I want the committee to do is to say, all right, we're going to take the criteria, the kind of grading or scoring criteria, and then I want to open the floodgates. Anybody who wants to suggest a sidewalk, we'd like to look at this. It's going to be the committee's job to say, all right, we've got these objectively determined criteria where we're going to take input from folks in town, and then we're going to score each one of these sidewalk locations. The bigger the number is, the more challenging it's going to be to do that sidewalk, and maybe we'll come up with a factor that allows us to attach estimated dollars to each one of those. And it's got we've got enough background, we can probably do that. But I want to just score them first, and then we'll take that and say, all right, how do we want to prioritize this? By the way, there might be a negative factor that says, it's expensive, but this sidewalk gives us an opportunity for children to walk to school, and that's good for them. And as a town, we're willing to make that investment. Could say that, in which case there's a negative number in there. It says, yes, it's expensive, but we're going to do it. So I want to go through that process of having a really great way of grading these sidewalks and rules about where they can be placed. In other words, I can't have a sidewalk, if you're going to start here, say down at Middlesex, and we're going to go up Mansfield, I can't go halfway, because it's being built as a destination to Ox Ridge. I got to make sure that not only this sidewalk's here, but all the kids feeding into that sidewalk, they're also going to be safe, right? It's got to feed into the neighborhoods just to the point where traffic stops being a problem, right? And so that's what I want them to all think about. And then come to our professionals, and me, Jennifer, and ultimately the Board of Selectmen, and say, all right, we've now thought about this, and we think objectively this is the priority, we should do this. All right, now let's go cost some of this stuff. And now, that's what this is going to cost over this timeline to do this. That's an appropriation I can go out and defend, right? Because it's appropriately graded, it's citizen-driven, it's got realistic cost numbers, and it has a timeline that's consistent with the resources we have internally and externally to build those. So that's what we're going to do. I think the end result is going to be a prioritized list that people should be happy with. We'll be eyes open about the cost, and there's not going to be any wasted time with the committee because they're going to be using criteria developed by professionals. This consultant, by the way, has broken up his work into 2 phases. This first phase is developing the charter and mission for the committee as well as the grading criteria. Second phase is he's going to be actually working with the committee. So you'll have access to a professional while that work's being done, who can make sure that the criteria are being used properly and answer technical questions about feasibility and all that to help the grading be done properly. So I'm excited about it. We need another month or so to sort out the criteria and things, but then we're going to open it up, see who wants to be on the sidewalk commission or pedestrian commission, and we'll get started with it and move forward.
All right, so you're expecting that work to be completed in the next month, and then we'll start moving back to
He started on it, Ed sent him some draft materials, and
About a week and a half ago, I sent him my grading stuff, and he's going to look at that and manipulate it and.
we're on top of it. I'm a little flying a little blind, so I'm not quite sure how long that'll take. I expect to have kind of a week or 10-day check-in call with him to see how it's going, but we'll move that along. Patty?
John, I would just say that the criteria, and I don't want to get ahead of things, but as you start thinking about the prioritization criteria, I think it would be important to incorporate in and I'm not quite sure how to phrase this, but the potential for increased pedestrian traffic once the sidewalks are in. It's one thing to say, and I understand your comment about Upper Hoyt Street, and there are 20 commuters, and even as an adjunct to that, that 20 might turn into, optimistically 30 or 40, if there was a sidewalk. Because people then could say, hey, I can walk to the train, so I would buy a house there, so and that would sort of escalate. And I think the same applies to, I don't want to jump on Ox Ridge, because I agree with you, that's a very difficult area. Why we put a school, I'm not quite sure, but I think I would encourage you to incorporate in an escalation factor of some sort. I mean, just since COVID, and I've made this before, this comment before, so I apologize, but the number of people that are out on the streets today is a factor of 10 as compared to what it was before COVID. And I think that and I don't know if we've incorporated this into a town survey, but maybe we'll see this out of the POCD, that sidewalks and outdoor activity and getting folks out, the number of people that I've met in the last 5 years out walking has been, immense. And me, of course, they run the other way when they see me, but the opposite is.
Unless they see me and then they
Well,
do.
So I think that we need to factor that in, not just what it is today, but how it will impact.
I'd say that one of the things is keep in mind that if I were to do that, I would likely apply that growth factor to every sidewalk that was contemplated.
Yeah.
So, which is okay, but keep in mind the
Like a
purpose of
vector
the grading, which is to differentiate among sidewalk locations. And so if I come in and I do a potential usage analysis and it's X, this one sidewalk, this sidewalk, that sidewalk, and I increase them all by 30% because I'm going to have 30% more walkers by putting in a sidewalk. It doesn't help me in different.
No, it shouldn't be equal. I mean, around the school is going to be different than around, I don't know.
Well, in a school, you'd expect it to be flat, right? Because the school has a fixed population of students and kind of all that. So I see your point, and what I'm going to encourage the committee to do is to think creatively about all of that, not in a made-up way, but to try to estimate some of that. Because even beyond the grading, anything we could do to further refine our prioritization of those sidewalks so that we get to good decisions, I'm going to encourage that. So I agree with you,
I have another comment, but I don't want to
I think you
dominate.
make a good point, Patrick, that once the sidewalks go in and people become aware of it, then all of a sudden you're gonna see more people, if you build it, use it.
Yeah, if you build it, they will come.
To layer into his comment, that there's situational things. So the other landmine sidewalk is Edgerton, right? But since that was last looked at, 2 major developments have gone in, right? All of which bring residential. A third one's about to go in. So whatever estimate you might, I know that hasn't happened, but you did an estimate 3 years ago, 5 years ago, that would no longer apply in terms of usage because the situation changed.
So that's the plan, not hiding anything with the consultant. All of the grading criteria is going to be public. We'll have a public process for selecting members of the committee. I would invite any of you that have expressed an interest. I also don't want a committee of 50, so we're not having that. This is going to be ideally 7, at the most 9. You get beyond that and the group becomes non-functional when it's task-specific like that. But that said, I'd love to have thoughtful people on this committee and entertain your suggestions.
Can I just comment that I think the new sidewalks that we're looking for, the new sidewalks that were in the pedestrian report from 12 years ago are generally speaking gap fillers or places that are kind of clearly lacking connections.
Yep.
Those,
Helpful. for sure.
right, those haven't changed. Right, those have been on the docket for a long
Well, a lot of
time.
them have been built though, would you say, Ed, in terms that we're in that.
Done with a couple, I'm gonna say a couple, I haven't done more than just a couple.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, a lot of good work's been done on sidewalks. Most of it's been rehab. There have been a few chunks of new sidewalk put in, which is great. I mean, we, as a committee, Rolf, remind me, I believe it was 2 years ago that we voted to recommend the reestablishment of the PIAC, right? So that's just asking for a committee to be established, not even to get to the work.
Well, we're gonna do that. now,
Well,
but-
and John, let me just finish then.
Yeah, sure.
We then met with you a year ago to say, hey, we had this vote a year prior, and we'd love the PIAC to get reestablished. And at that time, I was like, yeah, we're gonna do that, and it was kind of time indefinite. to hear your discussion, I mean, that's a lot of words for, we see what can happen when there's motivation in the first selectman's office to get something done. Because we got a proposal for 2 different projects that total over $10 million of investment. And that came together very quickly. So when,
What is that?
that's the Wheat Beach and the Pear Tree Point
It's taken
projects.
us 10 years to
Came
do Wheat Beach. I wouldn't characterize it as quick, but
Reasonable people may differ, but well, I guess my point is,
I'm team.
right, so when there's motivation to do something, it's evident, right? Because we see stuff come together quickly and they get on agendas quickly and things move very quickly. When that's lacking, it's equally evident, right? So I guess I would ask, because we have made this request many times. We have asked to fill in the sidewalks, we have asked to fill in the gaps. You know, there's only so long we can scream into the wind here that this is something that is important to us, right? And that we really want to have done, and not to have another year of proposal and a year of study, and then to be portioned this out for another 10 years when we can't do more than 55 feet of sidewalks in a year because we can't get the contractors for it. I mean, I would turn it around and say, let's find a way to figure out what all the gaps are. And I would start with the list that's in the PIAC report and start by striking things off instead of trying to build up from a zero base. And I would say, let's figure out what we can do, and let's figure out what the cost is to do that in 5 years. There's no need for us to wait longer because we've been waiting a long time already. And then we have made clear, and John, let me just finish. We've made clear in this town that when we want to spend money, we find the money, and we do it for things that, in my personal view, may not always have maybe the groundswell of support that sidewalk clearly do. So again, I would ask, you've outlined all the obstacles to doing Upper Hoyt and all the obstacles to doing Pembroke. That's a challenge. And I appreciate all the challenges, and we have very smart people, both on our staff and contractors, who come to solve those challenges. Let's solve those challenges. We've done the low-hanging fruit, and let's tackle the hard stuff. And if the hard stuff is, we gotta get 3 easements on Upper Hoyt in order to kind of solve that problem, let's do that. Like, when you're listing all the things that are obstacles, I'm saying, yeah, let's get to it. You're outlining the punch list, let's go punch it out. So I think it's really important that we tackle this, and I think the sidewalks have had a lot of support for a long time. This is the thing that people come to me most about among my constituents. So I would ask that we proceed on this expeditiously. Thank you.
All right. Any other comments about new or added sidewalks? All right, I just have one quick thing, maybe it's not so quick, but it is in the capital expenditures for the Salt Box Coach Lamp Drainage Improvement Project, $6.7 million for the fiscal year 26-27. So I just want to touch base with you, Ed. How's things going with, I know that there's been a lot of work going on with design and engineering, specifications, etc. Are you on track? And if so, when do we think this is going to be ready to go out to bid?
Last week got the first. Let me go in a second.
Thank you.
I would support getting a quiet set of wheels. I really would. Over the years, that happens more often than you would think.
You're gonna have to ask about 43 times though, because we're kind of slow.
Be a small shackle or 2 to buy those tires. I'll take care of that myself. So Salt Box. So last week we got the 90% drawings from the consultant. Let me address the 6.7. That's still the only number I have from original. So we haven't gone through and done a full estimate of the project just yet. We are ironing out some details with the utility companies and some of the easements they thought they had or think they have. But there's some work to relocate some electric and some cable, underground cable. But right now, we're at a point where we're going to submit those plans to the DEP and Army Corps. We've met with them twice already, virtually. And once we get them submitted and give them a very short period of time to start looking at them, we're going to submit for our EPC application, environmental, and go through the EPC planning and zoning process. So that'll happen over the next couple of months.
One thing to add is, I think I signed the final paperwork for a $500,000 state grant that's going to support this project that Representative Mara was able to secure for us, so that'll help offset this cost, which is great.
I think we just sent them back the contract, we went back and forth on the contract a little bit, we just sent it back to them with our final details. Just so everyone knows, grants are a little bit tricky, because they come with some strings attached to them, so you have to know that going in. This is a project where the set-asides that they put for smaller businesses, because of the size of the project, should be able to be handled quite easily, in my opinion. It's the other ones that the 1 million and less, and it's a traffic signal project where most of the money's in the traffic signal, and you're not gonna find a small business that does traffic signal work and so on. So this one here, the 500,000 is a good step for us in the right direction. It's at least alleviate some of the stress.
So with 90% of the design plans in, will you be reviewing that on a consideration to what's in the budget now at 6.7 and determine whether or not that's still valid or subject to change?
Well, I'd like to be able to say that nothing's gonna change in those plans when they get back from the DEP, Army Corps, and EPC, but I can't guarantee that, so I usually don't do an estimate just yet.
Okay.
But they are building one as they do this, maybe able to add or take away a few things depending on the project scope of work. So what's end up happening is, the big piece, of course, is the outlet. We have to dredge that piece of Holly Pond, the small section at the outlet. We have to de-water, we have to do sheet piling. That's probably one of the more expensive sections of it all. The other piece is going from Salt Box Lane East to Coach Lamp. There's a very, very tight easement in there that has electric and underground cable that wasn't mapped, that we did find out about, and we're working with the utility companies to relocate it. When that's all said and done, as soon as those approvals are coming in, I have to start working on, and though we identify the easements, starting to put the documents together.
So you still got
I got quite a bit of work to do.
Good bit of work still to get done.
I was hopeful maybe January, February, that we'd be able to roll this along. It kind of bogged down with some of the issues with the neighbors, that they wanted a little more explanation on what's going on.
I'm familiar.
Wanted to be part of that process, so that took a little bit longer.
I understand. All right, thank you.
And,
No, go ahead.
how many houses in that neighborhood that are affected? I recall it being a dozen, I can't remember how many it was.
How many households are affected?
Households were affected by this flooding.
It starts quite a bit.
I don't mean,
I'm trying to visualize the slide that we had for the 100-year storm event, which is what we had, those 3 storms. There were 29 houses that were
not accessible.
not accessible,
Right.
and another 40 that were impacted.
Yep.
I think it's somewhere around 69, 70-ish, in that whole 54 acre.
whole
So you're gonna do a $7 million project just for 70 homes? Maybe we should cost benefit that to see whether that's.
That's what I was trying to understand. In impact, if I recall, was limited access or unaccessible for a period of time. It wasn't inaccessible.
Well, I mean, once we have the estimate in the process, it'll go through the budgetary process. I understand there is a system that they'd like me to go through the normal budget process, not off-cycle, and I'm trying to keep that in mind as I go forward.
Yes.
And again, the first selectman will direct me how he feels he'd like me to move forward with that, but you folks will definitely get a chance to take a look at that.
Thanks, Ed.
Anything else on capital budget for Public Works? If not, the next item on the agenda is the Great Island.
Thank you, Ed.
You good?
Yes, thank you, Ed.
Are you all staying for this? 'Cause I do have one question.
Sure.
Well, mostly I just want to know, how do you see, and this is for both of you, the increases every year? Are they sustainable? Are we doing okay? Public Works versus some of the other areas? Are you concerned, or are we handling it?
I think as a town, the Public Works expenditures on kind of a operating and what I would call run rate basis. I mean, there's inflation and all of that, but we're seeing that in school operations in lots of different places. I think in terms of what moves the needle more in town are major projects that we decide to do. So whether that's Great Island, or it's a new Oxford school, or it's all the HHR work that we're doing, that work and the debt service associated with that is much more consequential, if you will, than some of the inflation that we see here. And so I like to focus on those kinds of decisions, and while making sure that we're doing the best practices that keep the run rate expenses under control. So for example, making sure we're bidding out work, making sure we're staying on top of contractors, make sure we have conversations with other towns to sort of benchmark this. We take advantage of state bidding programs, all the types of things that would do small things to keep those costs under control, but then on a compound basis are actually very valuable for the town. And I've seen Ed do this 50 times, whether it's waste related like he was talking about, or procurement for paving services, or there's a long list of those sorts of things. My personal judgment is he is extraordinarily good at staying on top of all that. So they get to worry about two things. One is what's the inflation rate in some of these costs, and how do we manage that? And then two, do you have a department head as well as members of the department that focus on this religiously on a day-to-day basis, which is what's going to keep us out of trouble? And I give Ed and his team a 10 out of 10.
That part I'm not worried about. You should see my husband is going to complain because every time I have a meeting with you, I say, he's the best guy. So.
All right, so the Great Island, just quickly, the operating budget, right now, for 25-26, the budget is $340,000. We just finished up the previous fiscal year, and we came in, I believe, under $300,000 for the operating budget of Great Island. But I would venture to guess, as going forward, and as we start to open up the island more with amenities, that more people are going to have to get involved. And so the operating budget is I think, going to be subject to increase as time goes on. The Reed Hildebrand operations and maintenance in their analysis posted a number of $525,000, and then an additional administration of $400,000. I don't know if those numbers are really anything that we can plan on per se. I don't know what your feelings are about that. I think it's subject to more, how soon per se the island can be opened up and bring more people in, and of course the support to that increased availability for the public.
Yeah, I mean, I looked at all the line item categories in that estimate, and I don't see those kinds of expenditures happening anytime soon.
Mm-hmm.
For the last fiscal year, we spent about $267,000 on kind of general maintenance on the island.
Mm-hmm.
About $100,000 of that is being spent on Eastern Land Management. We have a contract with them that assists us with sort of landscape management and all of that. Ed could maybe talk about that in more detail, but if you look at kind of what they're spending money on right now and the kind of cadence of work that goes on Great Island, ranging from landscaping, mowing, brush clearing, maintenance on a building if something happens. Now, all of that is pretty steady and pretty run rate. We're not really changing anything. So if you think about all the buildings, except for early access, which we can talk about, it's really, none of the buildings are changing. We're not opening any of those buildings. They're all just going to sit there for quite a while until, as a town, we digest some of these other expenditures and then decide what we're going to do. So if I look at sources of potential operating expense increases, there's not a really long list of that. Now, when we get parking and all that installed, which is really kind of first quarter of 28, it's a long time from now before all that work actually gets done, which I can explain. Until we get to that point, we're not actually going to have, a real change in terms of how the island's used. It's going to be in the sense that people are going to walk there, or they're going to get driven to the entrance at Rings End Road and spend time kind of walking around on the island. And that's going to be true for some time. So as a result, the cadence of public use on Great Island is not going to be materially different over the next few years. And as a result, I don't see that there's going to be any activity-driven increases in our operating expense requirements for Great Island itself. So I'm comfortable that, kind of a $300-ish thousand figure for some time might actually be all we need to spend.
Okay. Talking about capital expenditures, there is a resolution that's on the agenda tonight, and the resolution that we first received was for 2.9, but that has been now adjusted down by $660,000 to $2.3 million. John, I know you can give an explanation as to why the reduction. I think there was a part of that budget was for shoring up the buildings and that sort of thing, and that maybe we're not going to do that right away. Can you add to that?
Yeah, I think one of the things I thought about changing is when I put in a bonding resolution into the Board of Selectmen's agenda, I think I'm going to leave the amount blank. And the reason for that is that just in this case, we were still fiddling with sort of what we were going to recommend, but we had to get the budget or the agenda and materials posted. It's like, okay, just put that up there, it's fine. And then we changed our approach and ended up with a different number. And a lot of people have ascribed significant importance to the initial number that was in the agenda, and why did that change, and kind of all of that. I think what I'd rather do in the future is sort of leave that blank until we actually are sure this is what we're going to recommend, and then vote on a single number, so that you guys don't have to worry about deltas between what was in the agenda and what we did vote on. To explain, though, that change, there were two components coming out of the Great Island Committee and Reed Hildebrand's recommendations for an initial investment. One is called early access, which is what we are recommending. The other one is called building stabilization. So except for the creation of the bathrooms and little welcome center, we're not touching any of the buildings. There's no development or changes to any building on the island for a number of years. And that's okay, but one of the questions we would ask is, what investment do we need to make now so that these buildings don't fall apart, or there's not a leak or something else damages the building while we wait to make an investment in it or not? So Reed Hildebrand had a budget in the materials that they disseminated of something between $5 and $6 million. Okay, that's a lot of money for really no enjoyment by the public to spend. And so when I was looking at that, I said, what I'd rather do is have Ed and Tony go spend some time with these buildings and look at them and say, what is the absolute minimum we need to do to prevent these things from falling down or being a hazardous building on the island? And let's take a look at that number. I'd rather have those guys come in and really pressure test it, so that when we do come in and say, we're going to need to spend some money so that these buildings don't fall apart, because Ed and Tony said that's what we need to do. I think all of you are going to have a lot of confidence that that's the right answer, because they live here, they work here, they're part of this. And so because of that, I wanted to pull stabilization, wait for those guys to come in and take a look at it, come back to us in the first quarter and say, based on our professional assessment, and these are our jobs, this is what we think you should do. So that's why we pulled it, and that's why the bond resolution ended up being less, because the Reed Hildebrand planning work that needed to be done to get both projects done was just going to be less, and that's why the number ended up being 2.3 million.
And do you think you need till first quarter to do that work?
I'm not going to rush him. I think we just need to, when he's ready, he'll tell us. The buildings have
What's
been
the first
sitting there.
quarter?
Which first quarter? The year first quarter, January through March, or?
Well, let me ask you differently. How long do you think you need to do that work?
Just to go out, just to take a look through all the buildings? I mean, we've done a little bit of it already.
And put together a thoughtful estimate.
Yeah, I need a couple months to do that.
Okay.
So we'll come back to
So,
this.
yeah, you're
We're
gonna
have a
come back
discussion
later.
about kind of what that looks like. So we're just doing the early access part.
Okay, so the early access resolution is for $2.3 million. I sent out, John had sent out to the full RTM, but I also sent it out to you separately. There was basically two documents. One was the proposal from Reed Hildebrand, and they're listing their portion of the 2.6 million. And then John's presentation that went, I think, about 13 slides that ran through not just that, but other things that are going to be done in addition. I know there has to be a survey done on the property, and I believe it's Redness and Mead that would do that. And so that brings us up to the 2.3. what I want to be sure is that you all have a fairly clear understanding of what is the scope of what's within all of that work, that you took the time, hopefully, to go through those presentations and understand all the various aspects of what's going on there. If not, I have them here, I can put them up on the screen, so you tell me. Are you all
I'm good.
good? You good?
I'm good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Part of the reason I did all that was I knew we were gonna have to have a lot of committee meetings, a lot of discussions about this, which I invite, right, and I'm glad about that.
Video was good, thanks.
But I wanted to just
I thought it was good.
level set
Clear.
everybody, like, this is where we are, where we've been, and kind of what we're thinking about, and importantly, what we're not doing and not asking. But if there's something unanswered from any of that, I'd be happy to talk about that.
So this is preparation, site preparation is kind of how I interpret it, towards finally creating a situation where access can be achieved so that people can actually drive onto the island rather than walking from Pear Tree Point Beach, for example. And so, yeah, it's 2.3 million now. The various aspects of this early access initiative comes to a budget of, I believe, somewhere between $9 and $12 million, if I recall correctly.
The construction only budget, again, these are estimates, but they weren't just made up in 10 minutes. The redeliberation spent a lot of time based on their, Mark, I think, can attest to this, the committee, spent a lot of time based on their experience with all of this, and we think, based on what we're telling you should do with this, construction is between 10 and 14 million to get that work done.
10 to 14.
And so if you add in the 2.3 million, which is all the planning work to get to that, it's kind of 12.3 to 16.3 million, somewhere in that range to get all in.
Whole package.
Yep.
Oh, I missed that the 2.3 was on top of the,
10 to 14, yeah, take a look at that presentation slide again, you'll see that. You'll see the slide where I've broken out kind of what we're requesting now, which is the 2.3 million. The construction cost will be later once we have bids for that, and the 10 to 14 is narrowed to a pinpoint number. And it will be the sum of that number plus the 2.3 to get your total project cost.
I have one question.
Yes, sir.
But I may be jumping ahead to the construction cost. Have we thought about getting a sponsor or for the Welcome Center?
That's an excellent question. One of the things I talk about in the frequently asked questions is this notion of governance and sort of what are we going to do to accommodate kind of contributions at that level. I've talked to a few people who've done heavy fundraising, and what they tell me is that the kind of premier projects are the ones that are going to get a lot of attention or really be kind of the showcase of any particular property. Are going to be the ones that attract giant dollars. You're not going to be able to attract hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars for utility infrastructure or a bathroom or things like that. Now, we could have some brick campaigns and sort of that type of thing to offset a couple $100,000 in cost, but they're not going to really move the needle in terms of the cost of one of those projects. So as we get closer, one of the things I would like the building committee to take up, which we voted on the board of selectmen and we're going to expand, is to ask that question, right? Because Parks and Rec, for example, has run brick campaigns for funding the playground up at Cherry Lawn Park, and they raised a fair bit of money, not gigantic money, but not bad. We shouldn't leave that money on the table if there are folks who want to do that. And so we're going to get Parks and Rec to help the committee say, all right, let's get, say, one person to come out and help choreograph that type of thing. We'll use the Parks and Rec database to get assistance with that, publicize it. Yeah, we'll be able to raise some money to offset some of that cost, and it absolutely is not going to be zero. I think that's exactly right. I further said in that presentation that I'm interested in creating a Great Island Conservancy along the lines of what they have up in Waveney Park. So there's a Waveney Park Conservancy. And I mentioned in there they've got a fundraising success rate in the $300,000 a year zip code for stuff like this that they do. The town actually matches their budget, so they've got about $600 to do everything from small projects to the garden club to volunteer coordination, kind of all of that stuff that's very helpful, but they don't do millions of dollars in fundraising for that. So I think as we get closer to, say, a really big project, if we want to do that, we will target the donor community and say, can you help us with that?
I would think that the Welcome Center would be a great first
We'll
test.
we'll look about that. The good news is we're not going to need that money for another, call it year and a half. And so the process of outreach to that community will start forthwith.
Thank you.
Yes.
You said parking will be first quarter 2028. Can you,
By the time they finish that, yeah. So,
will there be no parking there before then, or can you just elaborate?
sure. Short answer is correct. We're not
Okay.
going to have parking there. The reason for that is that you finish the 23A work, the work to actually create the parking, which is the northern causeway under which all the utility work has to be built. So we have to rip all this stuff up again like Ed described in his work.
Okay.
To do all the sort of sensitive planning around all this, keep in mind that this is an integrated strategy that tries to balance between development and nature. So to give you an example of what that means, it's not just coming in and putting in parking. It's coming in and saying, all right, there's that tree, this tree, that tree, this tree. So let's configure this in such a way that we minimize that disruption and minimize the number of trees we have to cut down. So in order to do that, somebody has to come in and plan that, right? We've got to plan the roadways, the location of the parking such that these trees are not either cut down or damaged so that they die because of that. And you guys have seen that with house construction where trees are protected like that. That all has to be planned to do that. And it does add time and expense to this, but I think in terms of nature preservation and a commitment to that, which will surface not just in the surveys but in the workshops that people are really interested in, that requires spending some time and money to get that done right. So when you finish it, people look at it and say, that's fantastic. They hardly cut down any trees, and yet we have the parking that we need. You can't just snap your fingers and do that. So that's an example of how we're trying to strike that balance. It means that we can't put in the parking immediately. If I didn't care, I'd just cut them all down and I'd have parking in 6 months.
That's fair, but this is the question
But
that
that's
we're all gonna
exactly
get.
right.
is,
And
you
that's the
know,
way to
when can
explain
people-
it. So they'll take about 9 to 12 months to do that planning, and then we will come back, I'd say end of '26 or in the budget cycle, or say first quarter of '27, that first quarter when we have our normal budget process, we will have an appropriation request. So they'll finish these documents such that we can put this out to bid in our fourth quarter of '26, so a little more than a year from now. We'll put that out to bid, and come January, my guess of January of '07, we'll have a firm number for that with a qualified low bidder, in which case we'll be coming to you guys for an appropriation. Once that's funded, it's kind of 12 months, again, called first quarter 27 to first quarter 28 to do the build out. Roads, infrastructure, nature, meadows, ADA compliant parking, bathrooms, welcome center, 12 months.
Okay, thank you.
John, if I could just add, I'm sure you built it in there, but the whole permitting process, all the different agencies.
All built in, and
It is, it's in that.
It's both the town and to the extent there's anything that crosses the line with wetlands or anything like that, it's going to require deep involvement. Reed Hildebrand is also on top of that. So part of the fee that's built into all of this is navigating all of those permitting requirements. They're going to do all of that.
Yeah, well, for what it's worth, what we learned on the committee, the GAC committee, was just how in-depth those are, how many potential different agencies get touched.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's all, that again, you look at some of this, like, well, 2.3 million, yeah, you're gonna get a lot for that. I'm not saying these guys are cheap and cheerful, that they do quality work, but they're gonna cover all of those potential unknowns.
Now, when we go into construction, will they be involved with that as well?
Yeah, but I would say that their role is gonna be oversight in the capacity of master plan integrity, right? So they're going to come in with consultants that have laid out things such as the plan, the architecture, the aesthetics, the balance between development and nature, making sure all that is all overseen properly. A construction manager will actually come in and on behalf of the town manage all the contractors actually executing that work. The Reed Hildebrand will play a role in that process, and that's going to be important.
Now, that particular involvement during the construction phase, is that
Included.
included in the 2.3? Okay. So I'm putting up on the screen, some of the scope of what's planned to be done, 2-lane segment, 50 to 60 spaces, lobby space, accessible bathrooms, utilities, sewer, electrical, etc. And then the particularly to connect the root cellar, it gets converted with bathrooms. Full hazard remediation, soil contamination remediation, signs, light paths, etc. And the majority of all the work is within that red circle, which is the western side of the island. And that was something that a lot of people felt strongly, that we didn't want to get too deep into the island with these kinds of infrastructure, particularly parking.
It keeps cars on that close inside of the island and away from areas, not that are just nature sensitive, but frankly where you'd like to walk undisturbed by cars.
Yeah.
And you kind of want to walk out there, and okay, great. That's part of the reason we're doing the northern causeway changes and making that 2 lanes, so that southern causeway there, that's right down there, all of that is reserved for pedestrians. People will walk on that and not have to worry about cars.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Feel
better night.
As
Hope you
a,
feel better.
as a walker there and pedestrian and paddleboarding around and all that, how about getting rid of some of the old buildings? I mean,
How about that?
getting rid of some of the old buildings, like at the beach. There's 2 things, what is it, that other building that's
Well, there's the squash court.
squash court, right?
There's the bathhouses, there's the little
Yeah.
party house, all like I said. So-
Even some of the residential areas now.
So,
I mean, you're not gonna keep the residential areas,
So one of the things I've learned in this happy job
yeah,
is that it is impossible to please everybody all of the time.
yeah.
So just today, I had someone come into my office who was adamant that not a single building on that property should be taken down, including the bathhouses. Why? Because
Why?
it's an example of how things were back during the roaring 20s.
Back in the day.
People would want to see that at some point. You can't take those down. And a perfectly reasonable person who had a thoughtful point to make that says we can't do that. I've had people come in and say, we have to have unfettered dog access to Great Island. I've had people come in and say, this should be a nature preserve, we should have no people on Great Island. I've had people that says, we need 150 parking places. I've had people say, we need 0 parking places. My point being is that among all these different points of view, it is simply impossible, not only to get to something that everyone's going to be happy about, but even get to a compromise. Okay, so my mantra on this is I'd like an approach that works for most people, most of the time. Okay, and that's the best I can do. And so as a result, I'll take all those arrows, everybody can be mad as they want to be about all of this. And my job is to listen to that and say, all right, what can I learn from that will help us to get to something that works for most people most of the time? And that's kind of my standard for this. So I honestly, I take all critique of all this quite openly, and I will do my best to incorporate it, but I always will make as my reference that standard.
So this is you're asking us to vote on $2.3 million.
Right.
However, as your video stated, it implies, voting in favor implies that we're also going to vote in favor of an additional $10 to $12 million in the future. And a yet to be determined amount to preserve the buildings.
Which by the time you hear from Ed and Tony is going to be the absolute minimum required for.
But is a
safety
yet to be
hazards.
determined number
Yet to be
with an upper
determined,
threshold
not zero.
of, call it $6 million, which is an upper
A
threshold.
crazy number.
But something less than that.
What, sorry, 6 million? No.
No.
Well, that's where the rebuild grant came up.
That was a reasonable
That's-
brand number.
that's what was
We are
taken
not
out.
gonna have anywhere
Yeah,
close.
it's gonna be
to
a
that.
$500,000 or something.
As I said, it's an upper limit, it's not,
That's-
but it's an unknown number.
Yeah, to be determined.
That's. I'm-
Similarly, we have, through different bodies, another $9 million being asked for, another $11 million in total in 2 different proposals that are all coming forward.
That's for the Pear Street
Correct.
and the
And then
Reed Beach
Beach.
Meadow.
Which, for the CapEx budget you put forward of the non-school piece of $113 million is now, somewhere between 10 to 25%, 10 to 25% of that number.
Well, it's gonna be less because the placeholder I had for Great Island in that slide that's got
But the total was 113.
It's gonna be less than
So
that. 'cause
I'm
We're not
at
requesting.
14.
We're not requesting anywhere near the 50. for the
Right,
rest.
but the overall placeholder you had was $113 million, right? So $14 million, so 9 for weed and 2 for repair, I might have those reversed, plus
Can you
2.3
flip to
here.
that slide?
It's
Rob?
slide 25.
Very good, thank you.
I did read it.
I see that. Am I going too far?
2 more, keep going.
3, 4, 5.
There you go.
There we go.
All right,
So there's your 113,
yep,
right, with the upper part. And so if I take the 9 for Pear Tree Point, the 2.1, and now the 2.3, I'm at 14, right? But as you said, this is implying somewhere an additional 10 to 12 that would be implied that we'd be supporting, right? And so on a percentage of your 113, you're at somewhere between 10 to 25% of that number, right? Roughly speaking. This body had worked with the Board of Selectmen, et cetera, around 8 criteria to take things out of cycle for the budget. And now we're bringing 10 to 25% of the CapEx budget out of cycle. Why can't this wait till the normal budget cycle?
because.
In my reading of the 8 criteria,
I hear you.
it hits 0 of them.
Yeah, I hear you. The reason I'd like to do this now is that we have a professional team at Reed Hildebrand that's been working for a year on this right now, okay? And so to keep that team intact so that they're not redeployed on something else or take a 6-month break where they spend no time on all this, because we'd have to wait until, it's not just the first quarter, right? We would propose that in the first quarter, it gets debated, the Board of Finance votes, and the RTM actually doesn't vote on appropriations, saying that kind of on-cycle capital until May. So what we're talking about is we're gonna wait all of that time for these guys to begin that planning. So that means that parking is not gonna be on the island until late 2028 or early 2029.
We're talking about a 6-month delay on a multi-year project.
6-month delays. The question is do we want to wait until 2029 or late 2028 to put in that parking? Or do we want to take the risk that that team then goes off and gets deployed on other things, where we'd like to keep that team intact and keep some of this moving? I don't think, we're going to wait until the cycle for the actual construction request. So the reason for timing this as well.
But as you said, this implies that we're accepting the future one.
Well, but this is what I tried to explain with the appropriation strategy in the video, right? Which is, for every Great Island appropriation, you're gonna have to have a preliminary appropriation that gets all that design work done to get the bid documents. And then once the bids go out and we get a low qualified bid, then you're gonna have to have another appropriation vote on that. So the decision you have to make here is not just the 2.3 million, which is, it's more, do you want to do this at all? Because if you don't want to do this, right, or you say, I just want to leave Great Island alone and not spend any money, that's a point of view, but you would vote no on all this. Say, no, I don't want to spend any money. Right? In which case, kind of the early access, the parking, kind of all that stuff, you're saying, I don't want to do that. Okay? Because what you wouldn't want to do is say, well, yes, I'm okay with Reed Hildebrand doing this, but I'm on a hard no on $10 to $14 million in construction costs, in which case, kind of what's the point? So that's why I'm trying to link those two and get you guys, and why I made this video, which is to get you guys to think about kind of what we're asking for and why it's sequenced this way so that we can get to good decision making. The other thing I would say is that, let's say you delay Reed Hildebrand's work by 6 months. Okay, the way we've set this up is if Reed Hildebrand starts right now, then the $10 to $14 million the larger construction budget, when we request that, that's going to be in the first quarter of 2007 during the on-cycle process. It'll be on-cycle then. If you delay this by 6 months and you want the construction to be on cycle, we're not going to get to a construction request in the first quarter of 2028, in which case none of the parking will actually be delayed a year. Okay, so it's kind of either or. I mean, in my judgment, I think you would serve yourself well to get them started now on the design work. It's not a giant appropriation, to position us to do an on-cycle capital request for the actual construction work, which will be in the first quarter of 7. That's the reason for this timing and to request this to be off-cycle.
Yeah.
Question, why does, because in the 2.3, we have both all of the design and preparation work as well as all of the construction management, all of Reed Hildebrand's oversight of the construction. So it's really around all of the professional services that are necessary around the construction. Why is the construction management and the stuff that's directly associated with that in the first piece and not in the second piece?
Because I have a firm price for it now, and I'm not gonna have to spend the money until later on into that project. It's a smaller part of that budget, but once I have the funding in place, I've got the funding to pay for their services now, rather than waiting and having, say, the costs go up. I'm actually pre-buying that now, but I don't have to pay for it now. The borrow, or the funds that are actually drawn on the, that come through the bonding. It's not a huge amount of money, but it'll sit there for a while. We can invest that money and have earnings on that while we wait, as opposed to saying, all right, I need a two-pronged Reed Hildebrand proposal. We're only going to approve this, then we're gonna have to come back and revisit that. It's just to make this less complicated, because they're gonna do both roles. And I've got a firm price now. So, as I said in the video, this approach really does represent what I think is a bare minimum get started. We've had a lot of feedback from folks who are worried about the borrowings we've had for schools in Great Island. Yeah, the town's debt, as I said back in February of 2025 to the RTM to tee this up. All of that's true, right? We have borrowed a lot of money. We think the town has the capacity for this. There's clear impetus to invest in our schools. Great Island was a once-in-a-thousand-year acquisition. You talk to anybody who spends time at Todd's Point or Waveney Park, or these types of assets that are bought for those towns, and years later, they're all very thankful that they have properties like this, because over time, an extended period of time, they turn it into something that just makes their communities truly unique. We have a chance to do this with Great Island. At the same time, I'm mindful of people's concerns about costs, which is why we hived off the building stabilization, and we're really going to focus on that to get that to bare minimum. And then to just start in the gentlest way possible, which is to make sure all of our residents have equitable access to Great Island, including the people who are mobility challenged. And then when they get there and park, or when they're leaving, they've got a place that, for shelter, say in bad weather, a bathroom to go to, something as simple as possible. And that's it. We will let this settle. And then depending on community and frankly appetite from this group here, let alone the whole RTM, I did tee up in the presentation that we've taken out a lot of stuff we talked about. So one of them was renovation of the carriage house. That's about a $3 million number based on some of the estimates. That's a super little cool building that could be a place for an art exhibit, a reception, something cool. But we've set that aside right now, I think prudently. But the question for you all to answer in the run-up to the on-cycle capital request, y'all want to consider something like that? I mean, the welcome center's kind of cool. Do you want to be more cool? I don't know. I've tried to come in and tell you what I think is the bare minimum that we need to do to get this off to a good start, and not just with outhouses, something that people show up and say, wow, that's really nice, or wow, I'm a real estate agent. I'd love to take them to Great Island. Take a look at this welcome center, these nice bathrooms. They're getting started with this investment. Something you'd be proud of 25 years from now when a lot of the islands develop. Yeah, what we put in at the welcome center in terms of a nice place or this nice parking, wow, it looks terrific. That says Darien, it doesn't say some other place. So I'd encourage you to do this right. Let's take this initial step. We have the right professionals helping us with this, but we're going to be very prudent on other things like building stabilization, and let's give it a go.
I have in front of me a piece of information that was provided to me by Jack Davis. And he did a little analysis with some help from some other folks. And yeah, provided by Josh Kaufman, Director of Finance from Bond Advisory Report. So what he did was figured the Weed Beach project, the Pear Tree Point project, and the $2.3 million for Great Island. And to start off, bonding is a whole other world that I'm not very familiar with. Some of you who are more familiar with it, maybe you can chime in, but the first 2 years would be paid interest only, and the principal payments wouldn't start until fiscal year 30. This is his estimate of how this would go, okay? This is not etched in stone by any means. all debt other than Great Island original purchase is over a 20-year period. And he made some assumptions about how the grand list would continue to grow. And so the total payment of all of that together for the interest only in the first couple of years, first year would be $289,000, the second year would be $558,000, the third year would be $558,000, and they would start then in fiscal year 30 paying interest and principal, which would cost a little over $1 million for that year and the next year. So he looked at basically a 5-year period. And it would have an impact as we go into the fiscal year 2030 of 9, as Jack likes to say, basis points to the mill rate. Okay, I hope I said that correctly. I think I did. So he wanted me to, relay this to you so you get some perspective about, what the money is involved with these 3 projects, inclusive of tonight's resolution. And that, there is money that will be paid out in bond, but it's not a huge impact on the mill rate. My concern, and I think Ian was trying to express that as well, is that, yes, this is an aspect that is of consideration, but we have other things that are going on at the same time, and that we tend, when we do these off-cycle budgets, we're just dealing with one segment without having a totality picture of how that's going to affect the overall budget. And so I think that's a concern I have as well whenever we have an off-cycle, and we've done quite a number of them in the recent past. So, but I do think this information is somewhat helpful to give some perspective financially, but it's, again, relative to just these projects that are on the plate right now. I hope that helps to some degree.
Yeah, one of the things that you guys want, if it's helpful, I mean, I think there's value in the on-cycle capital process, but one of the things that I can start to build into these presentations is just sort of a default page. It says, look, here's your existing debt and debt service profile. Here are these numbers projected throughout some extended period of time. And here's what we're talking about in terms of the incremental impact on this, so that you can actually see that. And, I mean, the Fair Trade Point thing is a little bit bigger, but just to put it in context, we borrowed $100 million for HHR, call it $60 million for Ox Ridge, a little less than that, so it's 160 plus, Great Island at 85, so that's 245, call it $250 million. That's a lot of debt, and I'm not minimizing that. The $2.3 million for Reed Hildebrand to get started on was kind of less than 1% of that. And the Wheat Beach was less than 1%, 9 million to 13 million. These are much smaller numbers in the context, and I don't want to, again, downplay it. We need to be careful with debt in town. But the major decisions we've already made, and that was spending on Great Island and on schools. The rest of this stuff is mighty small by comparison. So when we present all this, we should look at the incremental debt service from all of that, in addition to all of this. I do think that, whereas this is added cost to the town, I think we're pretty mindful in terms of future expenditures, and I'll try to update that as well, so we have a look forward in terms of what those big numbers are. One thing I want to correct up there is I've got Middlesex up there for 60 million, and talking to some folks, they feel they don't really have an estimate of that, but they're going to try to make that number a whole lot smaller than what's shown here, so that's going to be good news. The only other major renovation that I'm aware of that might be on our horizon beyond Middlesex is the high school, which is 20 years old this year, but that's not for another 10 years. So if we were to stop the Great Island spending for the next 5 years, except for the high school and maybe Middlesex coming in here, there's not a whole lot of other big stuff that I can think of that we're going to need to spend a lot of money on. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't see it. The other thing is our grand list is going to continue to improve, and keep in mind the way that works is every time you get these new developments, and I've got an analysis going on this right now to get a precise number, every time those pies get bigger, for every incremental increase in spending, the impact on everybody who's here is less. So people get upset about development sometimes. The reality is that's a good thing for the town, and it's a great way to control taxes for the people who are here.
So I know we're not here to talk about pear tree and weed, but I will ask it now. I'm happy for you not to answer it, but I will ask it then in the bigger forum. Why do those need to come through off cycle?
It's strictly timing. So as a courtesy to the boating community, if we get the appropriation in place at the September 29th meeting, the contractors are able to start when boat season ends in November.
Okay, so it's about seasonality.
It's about seasonality, and they're gonna finish in May when the new boat season starts, both projects. That's great. If we wait, I'll just miss that window, and we'd have to decide at that point, do we want to interrupt boating season over the summer to get this done? My judgment, the answer is no, so that's the reason for that.
That's helpful, thank you.
Yeah, and Pear Tree Point has permitting deadlines, so that's another reason why
Okay,
that has to be acted
Yeah, it's a
on.
dredging permit deadline, it's not, I mean, we won't have any trouble meeting with this, even if it were delayed a little bit, we'll be fine. But if I have to delay it a year, I'm not sure I can get it done in the permit.
Is there an opportunity there for us to get some kind of conservation or federal funding returns on that?
Federal funding for all of that? Not that I'm aware of, there might be some potential state funding, but, you know, as Ed was saying, one of the problems with these grants is that it's quite rare to find one that doesn't have strings attached to it that we might not like. And so, in Darien, you've got the dual problem of grants with strings, which I've seen examples of this that many times suggest that we shouldn't even bother, plus the fact that it's Darien. And so for me to go out and chase after all this money, when I look at the rest of the state in Bridgeport and Waterbury, and seriously, do we need to take money from those guys to fund all of this? I mean, I could get some of it, like we have this $500,000 state grant to help us with salt box. Keep in mind that climate resilience is a much more attractive thing for state grants to be targeted as opposed to some of these other things. The Pear Tree Point is possible, we'll see. But we had to get something in place before we could figure out a way to apply for a grant. I don't think so, but we'll push that some. Good question. Patrick?
Yes, Patrick.
In the interest of time, I'd like to move that we adopt the resolution.
All right. Can I ask you to just table that for 1 minute?
Yeah.
All right, I just have one last thing, and then we'll move on to the motion. You touched on it earlier, but I'd like to just revisit it again for a minute. The concept of some sort of governance body for the Great Island. I mean, this committee has had this discussion. In fact, when the decision was before us 3 years ago to vote on the purchase of the Great Island, it was a discussion that this committee had about the fact that we felt that it would be important and in fact necessary at some point in time that some sort of governing body be formulated to manage the Great Island, not just in terms of day-to-day operations, but also in terms of long-term development, land management, preservation, conservation. I mean, you know, there are numerous different ways that I could see a body getting involved. And there are so many other things going on that the Board of Selectmen, I think, has to manage. And at some point, maybe not in the early access phase, but when some of these other projects for later on start to come to the table, I would really like to see some sort of organization formed to get involved at that point. And I'd like to hear your thoughts about that.
Yeah, I'm certainly in favor of the conservancy idea. I think replicating what they have at Waverly Park, I think makes a lot of sense. I'm gonna go meet with a guy who's on their board, but was one of the founders and the creators of that organization, and get not only his notes from how they did it, but stuff in retrospect they would have done differently. I think that's important. I am not in favor of creating a governance committee that is outside of the elected official oversight. So in other words, we have some of that in town right now. So for example, the police commission, once the Board of Selectmen appoints police commissioners, and aside from budget, we have precisely zero to say about the operations of the police department, nothing. The Darien Housing Authority is like that. Even Parks and Rec has got significant autonomy over our parks.
Isn't some of that state mandated though?
No. Well, for example, in Westport, the first selectman is the police commissioner and can hire and fire the chief at will. Right, we just don't do that here, and it's by charter and design. I'm not criticizing all that. It's just that, as a general matter, I really think that if we're going to say we want this structure put in place, what we're saying is we don't want them accountable to elected officials. And I'm not a fan of that, just as a general philosophical matter. What I'd like to do is figure out something that, if we're gonna put it in place, has direct accountability and reports to an elected board. I don't wanna create something that, for example, is not accountable to you guys, right? It's separately managed, they have their own powers, and aside from funding, they can do whatever they want. I'm not interested in that. That said, the reason that we could create advisory committees or other boards is because, to your good point, if the workload gets too significant and we need management help. There's a few ways to do that. I could appoint a committee to do that. I could we could create professional town staff. Part of the reason we have Ed Gentile is that I have neither the time nor certainly the expertise to run public works in a town like that. That's why we hire professionals. And so you could see another model here that says, well, I need a professional administrator that's on the payroll that runs Great Island, that takes care of all that from an administrative standpoint. It's not necessarily an appointed board or something like that. So I'm very mindful of getting the right management answer for that. I think we need to be creative in how we're going to do it. It doesn't necessarily mean that we have to surrender management of Great Island to an unaccountable and appointed board.
John, permission to speak freely.
Of course.
Do you think we're putting too much emphasis or demand on Ed? Like, for example, going overseeing the buildings. Shouldn't somebody from the building department that has more of a structural, electrical, plumbing, that type of deal of experience, give you that report and ease that responsibility from Ed?
So, if someone can help me find the appropriate group that appoints people to municipal sainthood, there are a number of people in this town with Ed on that list that I would appoint to that. One of the things that's been kind of gratifying in this role, and by the way, I've been in the job now almost 2 years. I can tell you, I mean, I've been an elected official in this town for almost 17 years. The last 2 years has been absolutely eye-opening. I mean, an astounding learning experience for me. I've been very surprised at the amount of things I've seen and learned about since I've been in this job. I don't take myself seriously, but I take this job very seriously, and it is a privilege to have this job. So one of the things that qualifies Ed for municipal sainthood is because he has what I would call an ownership mindset. So that if something's going on that's not right, that he finds that doesn't meet his personal standards, he simply is going to go through walls to figure out what that is. I've seen that time and time again. All of our department heads are that way. We should be on our knees thankful that we have the caliber of people working in town all day after day. I'm impressed on a daily basis. What happens though when he does that is he brings people like Tony, or he brings Brian, or he brings any of the other kind of talent that he has with him, and they all look at it. He's going to oversee it to make sure it's done to his standards, but it's not all on his back. The other message I take from what you're saying is we don't want to burn out Ed, especially since I'm going to make him work till he's 90. Jeremy too, and lots of these other people, no one can retire ever. So I don't want to burn him out, and you'd be surprised how much time I spend making sure that nobody's getting burnt out and nobody wants to. So I take your comment, I take that very seriously, and you're quite right to bring it up.
All right, would you please state your motion?
I move that we accept there's no number on this.
$2,300,000.
Well, no, I mean, in terms of motion number, or a resolution before the ballot.
Oh, yeah, I understand.
But the resolution to appropriate $2.3 million for planning and design of Great Island Early Access Project and authorizing the issuance of the bonds and notes in the amount of $2.3 million to meet the said appropriation.
Need a second? Second.
Okay, thank you. The motion is on the floor. Is there any discussion? Comments? Criticisms? Observations? Well, you guys are all quiet.
It's a lot of money.
We've been discussing it, so.
Yeah,
we have been discussing it.
Hasn't been said already.
Call the question.
All right then, are we ready to go to a vote?
Yeah.
Okay. All those in favor of passing the resolution, raise your hands. Okay, we have what, how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 approved. All those not in favor of the resolution, raise your hand. Ian, 1. Therefore, the resolution is passed. Do we have any other business tonight of pressing needs? If not, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Ian. Do I have a second? Second, Patrick. All those in favor? Aye. Thank you very much.
Any opposed?
Yeah, I'm staying.